right? Depending on who you ask, Dana White's never going to acknowledge that stuff. He'll probably say, you know what, he went to court, they tested it, it was a picogram, et cetera, right? For me, I think we're all athletes, and I've been tested at the liquor store from USADA. I've gone swimming, and when I came up from a lap, USADA was right there. It's almost like she just had fucking deja vu. She's right there. I've been tested all around the world. I've never hid from a test. I've always been compliant of giving, blood, urine, whatever they want. Now, John Jones does have some unconclusive, I guess you say. Well, it is conclusive because it said it was a picogram. My first thing is like, what is that doing there? Right? I mean, there's so many athletes there that have popped. I remember Sugar Sean O'Malley said he was grappling somebody and he tested positive for something that was inside of it. Everybody's popped for something. I've never popped for anything. Right? So for me to sit here and be like, okay, John Jones is a cheat and he's done steroids, I would have to be like, I want to be naive to say that he never did it. Same thing with TJ Dillashaw. Like, when he came out and popped and he says, I took EPO, I was flabbergasted. I was like, why? Why would you, like, you know what I mean? So, Gordon Ryan, he's came out, Craig Jones, they come out and say, I take steroids because everybody else is doing jiu-jitsu, right? And then my question was like, hey, Gordon Ryan, do you think you'd be just as good and be able to compete at a high level without steroids, right? He won't come on the Mighty Cast because I'm just going to ask him blatantly. I'm just have straight up. Same with Donald Cerrone. Donald Cerrone, he wants to come back and fight. He's been on TRT and he's been, straightforward. He goes, it makes me feel fucking great. I mean, with the train again, I recover faster. And that's what steroids does. It helps you recover faster from what people are telling me. So only person who truly knows if they took steroids or not is John Jones. Will he ever come out and say, yes, I've taken steroids? We have no idea. But, he does have, an asterisk on a USADA test. And for you, if you think if somebody's going to be considered the GOAT in mixed martial arts, they have a clean record. Let me ask you this, Guru, because you have probably the biggest following in mixed martial arts that you built from day one. What do you consider a GOAT in mixed martial arts? Like, what is it for you that gives that somebody earns that label?
Perfection, level of competition. I think when it comes to the greatest of all time, being great is an achievement of greatness. You know what I mean? How many great wins do you have? How many great moments do you have? That's what it comes down to. And listen, John Jones is the greatest of all time. He is. There's a lot of people that, listen, if we want to get into who's popped, Makhachev has popped before. And a lot of people have him like nearing the borderline. If he picks up a few more, he's going to be in the conversation. And there's a lot of names in the sport that have popped before. Like even you said O'Malley there as well. But I'm not saying O'Malley's near the GOAT conversation, but you know what I mean? There's a lot of names that have popped for something. So I know there's all of that. I consider John Jones the greatest of all time. You achieve legacy, you achieve it against names people know at a top quality competition. I think you're in the conversation because you did it across different promotions. I think that's a huge edge for you, to be honest with you. Especially at ONE FC, where I think the lighter divisions are a lot more credentialed than the heavier divisions. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
The heavier divisions, they almost don't have opponents in the heavier divisions. I saw Derrida speaking about that and Malakin and all of this. So I do consider an achievement of greatness. How much did you achieve? What did you do? Did you beat everyone you lost to? Who did you lose to? How good were they? Those things stick out. At GSP, he lost twice. He beat both of them. He redeemed it double. Got the double champ status. There's just how much do you one up the guy competing with you? The guy people are comparing you to. We see Nick has typed in the chat here to get back to the roids. 3 failed tests for PEDs, 1 for cocaine.
Okay.
He typed in the chat.
Okay, well, cocaine isn't a PED, right? So we can go ahead
in some places to perform, it could be.
But
in a cage, maybe not.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and say right now, when I started dabbling in THC, shout out to Via Hemp. invited him, sent me some good stuff, had a couple of tokes, and then next thing you know, the next day I went to the gym, did about 10 to 12 rounds. I swear it made me faster. And I told my coach, like, dude, this is a PED. He goes, no, you just got a lot of rest. That's what you got. You got well-needed rest, which helps me recover. So in hindsight, it could be considered a PED because it gives me the opportunity to relax my body. And, cocaine, maybe. I don't know. It's an upper. I've never done it before. So people in the chat, if you guys have done cocaine, please leave me in the comment section below to let me know what it does for you. And then what was the other two Nick said?
You get 3 failed tests for PD, 1 for cocaine, PEDs. With John Jones, it's just like, it was the pop for turinabol. I do want to mention this. It was a pop for turinabol, trace amount, but there's levels of understanding of this DJ. So I get there's the naivety of... Maybe it was just this that popped up in his system. We've seen it with many fighters before.
Yep.
But when the fans, I'm speaking as a fan here, you're a fighter, so you see John Jones and think that the cocaine, or not the cocaine, the PED didn't make him go to the body early against DC and then whip a head kick up out of nowhere and catch him off guard. You know that. Yeah. But as a fan, and speaking for the fans, what we see is who's popped for something trace amount that has just been brushed over.
Yep.
We see Sean O'Malley, a future superstar in the company. We see John Jones, the GOAT of the sport. Who's the only guy to grow a boob in the octagon? It's Adesanya in the modern era. Just so happens to be the front runner and the leading star at the time. It's funny to talk, but fans notice that the only ones with these anomalies are the ones that are either just so happen to be the best in their division, just so happen to be above the rest, or just so happen to be like a guy that they want to create into a star. Who's the guy that finds out in the sport that you can take out of the USADA window and get on roids to recover? Weidman didn't know about that when he broke his leg. McGregor did. McGregor pulls out of the testing window, takes the roids. It just seems to be there's a gray area, and that gray area very heavily benefits, just so coincidentally, the stars of the sport and the best names at fighting in the sport. And when it comes to Jones and his failed tests, they talk about turinabol, they talk trace amounts. The turinabol pulsing in his system wasn't proven to be done with turinabol. It was proven to be done with Clomid, which is another failed test of John Jones that he had when he tested positive for Clomid. And that was something that was said, the turinabol, it's pulsing in his system because Clomid has done it before. And Clomid has stuck around in people's fat cells and popped up again long after they've taken it in a trace amount. But Jones never tested positive pulsing for Clomid data. There was also the thing that came out after the DC fight, one of the DC fights. Someone might have corrected me the other day, but one of the DC fights, it came out that he had the testosterone levels in that fight of a castrated male. They were very, very low. And I don't think John Jones is castrated chemically. So something in that DC fight must have been replacing his testosterone. So I think there's a gray area, but then there's a thing that the fans see and they think, we're not hearing about the pulsing picograms of, who's to say a name? We're not hearing about the pulsing picograms of Carlos Diego Ferreira.
Yeah.
We're not hearing about the pulsing picograms of a Jim Miller. We're not hearing about the pulsing picograms of a Suma Dwerji. Maybe he has actually before. I'm not sure that somehow springs into my mind. But we only seem to hear about these anomalies in this random thing popped up in their system.
Yeah. Well,
McGregor takes that the testing window. Jones pops for this 3 times, 4 times. A few other things here. And then you see these other names. Adesanya grows a boob. You see even in lower divisions, you see Dillashaw. Who's the bantamweight in UFC history that is the guy that has the drug problem or the PED stain on his legacy? Just so happens to be Dillashaw, who has a conversation to be the greatest bantamweight of all time. So for you, as a fighter, you understand the game differently and you go, the roids ain't making Jones fight the way he does. That's John Jones. And I get that from a fighter perspective, but the fans go, God, it's only the greats that are having these problems. There must be an edge. There must be an advantage. Is that the reason for the advantage? And that's what the conversation is. Just to get it out there. Yeah. Just to get the argument out there.
Yeah. So I'm going to approach it in 2 aspects. One, I think Israel Adesanya's his chest, the pec. I remember something, it was like a medical condition and he got it checked on. Nick, while we're going over this, you can look that up. But let's talk about that whole thing about the failed USADA test. For me, I'm such a black and white person where it's like, okay, you failed that fucking test. There's no reason why I should have been there. Right? Like there's just no reason. There's no excuse. Right? I've done many, many drug tests and not one thing has ever came up in my test. They tested A, B sample, nothing. I'm never taking anything, right? So I feel comfortable saying that. So for me, when I hear you say that, like, he's had 3 failed drug tests, one's cocaine, I'll let that one slide. The other 2, my first question is like, what the fuck's that doing in your system? That's like my hard ass, like, what is it doing in your system? And the hardest thing too is like, at one point in time, you had TRT that was, people got exemptions for TRT. Yeah. Right? So
but wait,
that's something that it's also, I don't know who's on TRT or whatever. Right. But for me, if what you're saying is that if somebody who has a failed USADA drug test, they're not in the GOAT conversation. I should, because for me, I understand, like, when you're in a training camp, you need to recover. If you can't recover, you're not gonna be able to train harder, So for me, if I was to sit back and be like, okay, John Jones has 2 failed drug tests. From what I'm saying, okay, you're done. You're not in a GOAT conversation. You're exempt. GSP, let's look at your record. Clean. Everything came back clean. Boom. You're on there.
Demetrius Johnson, your record. Everything clean. Everything, no stain.
No stain. You look at Habib. Clean. Shit, Michael Chandler, it's clean. No stain, And here's the thing too. When athletes suffer a horrific injury and they get out of the USADA testing pool and then they take steroids, if they take steroids, I don't know if Conor Graves taking steroids, but I just rather people come out and be honest about it. It's like, hey, dude, I broke my fucking leg. I got out of the USADA testing pool. I dropped on steroids to help my injury heal faster. And now that I'm off steroids, I'm getting back in the USADA testing pool to be able to compete. Why not be open about it instead of having this cloud, right? I'd rather athletes be straightforward that they take steroids like they do in the jiu-jitsu community instead of in mixed martial arts, right? But then again, it's going to, discredit everything they have been able to accomplish or they've done. So for me, how I am, it's like, you failed the test, doc. Nah, you don't get it. You're out of it, right? So it's just so hard because I don't want to take away the greatness as John Jones has done.
I know.
Right? You know what I mean? That's the hardest thing. It's like, man, you failed a drug test. It was a picogram. It shouldn't have been in your system to begin with, dog. That's how I feel. But it's a hard conversation to have. It's a very hard conversation to have because, USADA said, oh, it's good. He passed, even Sugar Sean O'Malley, like even him, I left him to death. And he said, do I look like a guy who takes steroids? Like, no, you don't. You're not, boom, shred it. But it was in your system. Why was it in your system?
Why?
And that's why I love USADA. USADA is fucking king dingaling because they will come for you wherever you're at and they will collect that sample. You can hide, you can run, but they don't get that urine and they're going to get that blood.
Yeah, they're going to make it happen. But on that point, I get exactly what you mean, but maybe we're entering a new era where fans are just I think fans that came up, I was before the USADA era, but there's a lot of fans now, especially that watch my stuff, that are joined during USADA. So they're on the you're an OG fan of the sport. You've been around for so long. You've seen the Wild West of, I know this guy's blasting all kinds of chemistry. This guy's a walking chemistry experiment going into the cage right now. So you know that era. Whereas the fans that are watching my content and the fans of just after my generation of fans, they're of the USADA era where they have an expectation that everyone is natural and everyone is clean. And I think that's like a new expectation moving forward. So I just think we have enough proven or no stain on a legacy people like you, GSP, Khabib. We have other guys moving up right now that are pushing towards high legacy status right now where they don't really have a stain on their legacy, where people are kind of like, do we need to have the argument of everyone's on it? So just because this guy had this, or not because everyone's on it, but a lot of people have tested positive. So just because this guy doesn't mean he has to be out of the conversation.
Yeah. And I think, prior to when it was the Wild Wild West, a lot of those guys who were over in Pride in Japan, they were on the sauce, right? Like I never forget one of my coaches, Brad Kurtzen, he was over there and he saw Mauricio Shogun Hu and he goes, holy fuck. He was massive. And then they come over to the UFC, they don't even look like, look at Alistair Overeem. That's another prime example. Somebody who was small. I mean, when you're 18, 21 years old, you're almost at that peak performance of which you're going to be able to develop, right? And if you look at Alistair Overeem, 23, 25, and then he blows up, fucking massive, all this. There's no way you could put that amount of muscle on your body in a short amount of time while doing high level cardio. There's no way. And he said he ate horse.
Possible.
Yeah, it's not possible. He said he ate horse meat on one of his interviews. And then now
I don't know what those horses were on, but they were on some kind of HGH, it seems like. I don't know.
Yeah, and then now you look at Alistair Overeem, he's way more leaner. He looks more what his body is, his natural muscle capacity of his genetics would be, essentially, right?
Yeah.
That
what
is
he used to look like.
What he used to look like. That is a
People forget that about Alistair Overeem.
Yeah.
He used to be a very lean, slender, lanky kid for a kickboxer. Even when he was fighting these big names like Chuck Liddell,
Yes.
he was like a lean, Liddell was like pushing him around as like the smaller guy. And then he sort of inflated into this thing. But I get what you're saying there, because when you said Overeem and talk about roids, I think immediately, oh yeah, look at that Lesnar fight. Oh my God. Because what the narrative is, of course, Overeem was on something, but look at the guys he was fighting.
Yeah.
Even then you brought up Shogun, and then I was talking just about Jones testing positive, and I'm like, well, Jones had these few little blimps in his career, but we know Shogun was on something. So are we going to hold Jones too accountable, knowing that these Pride guys have been on things before? So I don't know. I just think there's a different mindset of fans that have come up in the era where they have an expectation that people are natural, and they have an expectation that there should be no blimp